This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I am your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Allister Frost. And he is a future-ready mindset thought leader, author, and speaker who empowers business leaders, and teams to thrive in uncertainty. As Microsoft's first digital marketing strategy leader and an award-winning speaker for global giants like 3M, Vodafone, Cisco, and NHS, he helps leaders leverage change by activating three AI-defeating human superpowers: curiosity, creativity, and courageous communications. He is the author of Ready Already, the Future Ready Mindset to Keep Up, Stand Out, and Shape What's Next. So, Allister, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
Oh, thank you so much, Steve. I'm really looking forward to chatting about all things future and helping your listeners to, stay relevant in the workplace for as long as they choose.
That's great. That's great. So let's give a little context. I just read a short bio, but just tell us a little bit about where you grew up and just kind of how you got interested in the tech world. And I know you've traveled the world, so you probably got a whole lot to do, a lot to say. But let's just make a little summary of where you started and where you're at now.
Well, I'm a Brit, as you may tell from my accent. So I grew up in England in a little seaside town called Walton-on-the-Naze that no one in the world will have heard of, but it's a lovely seaside place, very busy in the summer and deserted in the winter. And I grew up there, and I went off to university in France. I spent a few years in France because I wanted to discover a bit of the world. And then I spent 20 years after graduating in the corporate world, 10 years at Kimberly-Clark, great American company, producing soft paper products, Kleenex and Huggies, big brands like that. And then I kind of felt the lure of the tech sector. So I did something that was frankly quite insane. I took all of that brilliant knowledge of the grocery sector and of the, manufacturing and so on. And I went and joined the tech sector at Microsoft, which to this day, I'm not entirely sure if I was sane at doing that, but it was the most wonderful thing because I learned so much about them. I was just fascinated by what tech could do to make me, selfishly, make me a better person. You give me a pen and paper, I can't draw for toffee, but if you give me a computer, I'll have a go, and I can undo and I can get it right eventually. And I love that. So, and that's really, that brings us up to sort of, 20 years into my career. But then I left Microsoft and decided I want to do something for myself. So I set up my own business, and I was initially doing digital marketing training. But these days, I am a full-time motivational speaker, traveling the world, helping people to think differently about change and to develop what I call a future-ready mindset.
Okay, and you've written this book called Ready Already, which for those on the video I'm holding up now, which is a great book, very well done, I might add, and I like it because it's it's short and concise, but really gets to the points well. Sometimes I see speakers that come up with a point and they can tell it in a 15-minute TED talk, but then they write a book for 350 or 400. It's nice to see it well done. So anyway, in talking about that a little bit, so we're talking about this future ready mindset that you referenced. And it's and you say that everyone has to have their own approach to it. So just tell us a little bit about what that is, and what do you mean by we have to have our own approach to it?
So future ready mindset is just three words that I smashed together a few years ago. It's become quite a popular phrase. I see it popping up all over the place now. Yeah. And the idea was that the thing that I commonly observed, I was teaching people after I left Microsoft about digital marketing and new techniques and all the tech and so on. And I just consistently observed that people didn't change well unless they wanted to change. There was, you can make the shiniest object known to man, but people won't embrace it unless they want to, unless they believe in it. And so the mindset became really essential. And I also, for years, have felt really troubled by this notion that I could see how quickly tech was moving. I could see this, it felt like a tsunami of obsolescence was roaring towards us. And we were all sort of sitting here unaware that this thing was coming. Because it gets harder and harder to keep up with change as change accelerates. And we all know that as we all get older, we lose the ability to learn as quickly as we used to, and also the appetite. And we like to build a comfort zone. We like to build experience and get used to doing things. So the future ready mindset for me is a very individual thing, in that everybody needs to figure out what matters to you. What do you want to achieve in your life? What really floats your boat? And then you need to focus on that, and then try to explore the things in the near future that will allow you to do that thing better. And that's why I think the book is helpful, because you can read it as a one person. You can really think about, okay, what does that mean to me? What would I do with this? Rather than maybe turning to your boss for advice or turning to a colleague to tell you what to do. It's a really personal journey that I think we all need to go on to figure out what's the brilliant future that we need to create for ourselves.
And I think you say in the book too that people are pretty good at change and realizing good leaders know that we have to change, but
Mm,
yet we kind of focus on, we're very aware of what that potential change, what the loss will be. So there's the fear part of
mm,
that. So that's
yeah.
something that okay, I know I need to change. I have a mindset that I'm willing to change, but then I always have that fear of, well, with that change, what am I going to lose?
This is the greatest myth, I think, is a lot of leaders think that people don't like change because change is always slow, expensive, it never quite achieves its objectives. Something like 70% of change initiatives in the workplace fail to achieve their initial goals because they run on too long, they don't quite hit the mark. And it's not that people don't like change, because if you question people, and you ask yourself, really, imagine a world with no change. Now, for some people, that might be paradise, but for most of us, it would get very boring very quickly. And actually, change is something we need to stay vibrant, to make life interesting. That's why we have the seasons in nature. That's why things move on and evolve. But it keeps life interesting and keeps us engaged. But it is the loss that accompanies change that's the hard thing for most of us, because any change, any significant change, means accepting that something that you have today is no longer as useful to you or as valid. And that might be loss of status, loss of expertise, loss of friendship groups if you move to a new job, for example. And any change really is all about helping people to accept that that loss is going to happen, is a necessary thing in the transition, and that the change is still worth going for. Because the bit that we fear losing is our comfort zone more than anything else. And that's the bit that I argue in the book. I think your comfort zone will destroy you if you try to stay in there for too long, because the world's not going to sit back and wait for you to change. It will move on anyway.
And you also state in the book too that to handle this change and be ready for this change and whatever, you really need to go through kind of a personal mission, to figure out, because that's really the compelling motivator. So you have to be very clear with what you want to do and what your purpose is, and how you're going to do this so that you can accept this change and not feel like you're losing something.
Yes, and thank you for pointing out that the book is a short book. I mean, that was the whole point. Is I really don't want people sitting around having to trawl through a long book. I want them to get on with creating their future. Life is short. Just here's a technique, give it a try, see what happens. But the personal mission it's the model that's in the book that is built around. It's kind of 5 steps, but in the middle of those 5 steps is the personal mission, and I think it's so important. I honestly believe for most people, if going to work is about getting paid, maybe getting a bonus, it's about status, it's about that's your identity. I get that, and that was important to me in some stages of my life as well. But if that's all you've got, I don't think that's going to be enough fuel for you to want to create the better future that could lie ahead. I don't think that's going to be more money, more status, more whatever. That's not enough. And I talk about the I think you have to accept that the way that you earn your success in the service of others can give you the fuel to want to keep going and keep changing and keep improving. Because it's crazy now, this pace of change that we're seeing in the world. It's going to be even more crazy in the future. And if you're up for keeping up, then you are going to get knockbacks. It does take more energy. It is much easier. Let's be really honest. It's much easier to sit back and cruise through life, doing kind of, the minimum to get away with it, not be noticed by the boss. You still get paid, you still get the occasional bonus. Life's good. I get, that's a nice place to be. But to actually look at your world of work and say, this could be better, that could be better, this could be changed, we could do this, that takes real courage and energy. And so the personal mission is that fuel. It's locking on to, the heartfelt reason why you go to work each day and you do something because it's in the service of others. It makes other people's lives better. And I think that's the sort of place that you need to connect to if you want to keep coming back again and again and again, trying to make stuff better.
Yeah, and I think also identifying with, what is it that I do? I might know my purpose, but what is it that I do? And I don't know
Mm,
if you know who Seth Godin is, but I went to see him speak
yeah.
in a
Wow.
session once, and he was talking about you need to identify, what you do, because a personal story on my side was I was a young CEO, and people would say, well, what do you do during the day? I mean, like, what do you do? And I'm like, let's see. I answer some emails. I talk on the phone. I go to meetings.
Yeah.
And is that the most boring thing you could ever think in your life?
Oh.
So Seth Godin said, no, you got to find something that resonates with you and motivates you and whatever. So I went home, worked
Mm,
really hard on this. He gave some ideas about what we could do. So I came up with three things. And what I say now is I say, as a CEO, I'm an ambassador for my company. I help leaders learn and grow, and I'm a storyteller. And so
mm,
when I'm doing all those things that I said before that seems so boring, I say, okay, which one of those three things am I doing now? And then it gives me purpose, and then it gives me
yeah.
something to do. And
Yep.
so, I used that the whole rest of my career, because it was kind of like, okay, I can identify with that and I can get excited about that because
Mm,
sometimes, you just need to define it in your terms,
yeah.
which as you say, fuel your passions.
You're right, Steve. It's a little game I often play when I'm out on the speaking circuit and I'm at an event. Naturally, I'll just, get into conversation with new people and I'll say, so what do you do? And by far and away, the default response is a job title. I'm
Yeah.
a regional sales director. I do, they'll give you the label. I work in procurement or something. And that's that's an identity that's been given to you for your job, but you're more than that. And that's why the personal mission, it is personal, it's bigger than purpose. There's been so much buzz and excitement about purpose, but I really want people to bring it back to who you are, what floats you about, what fires you up. And I realized that the value that I can have when the penny dropped for me, because I went through life thinking naively that when you get a job, a company gives you a job because they employ you to do a job, right? There's a task. The company employs you to do a task. And one day I flipped it in my head and I thought, hang on, no, that's not the right way to look at it. Actually, I employ my company to allow me to do the amazing things I want to do. And the minute I saw that, I thought, actually, no, yeah, I'm not just a cog in the machine. I'm actually choosing to work in this place because that's where I can achieve be in my zone of excellence. That's where I can transform a small bit of the world. And the minute you get that sort of realization, you think, I am bigger than a job title. I'm making somebody somewhere's life better. And it really is, it's really good to connect with the downstream consequences to almost take this to the nth degree. And there's an example in the book about, I don't know, let's say a cleaner who goes into school classrooms and cleans up. You can think you're a cleaner and that's all you do. No, you're not. You are preparing a space for the next generation of engineers, astronauts, who knows what. So they're going to have a great day. The teacher's going to be productive. Everybody's going to go home with a smile on their face. That's an amazing gift to give to the world. And yeah, your job title still says you're a cleaner in a school, but you know what? You can go in each day with that pride. And when you've got that pride, you'll be looking for ways that you can do your job better
Yeah.
because you know it's important.
It's such a simple mind shift, but it
Mm,
is a mindset that totally changes your outlook. I mean, it's
mm,
just instead of, you described it perfectly. And along those same lines, is kind of think what you also said is, what can I do in the service of others, like the story you just
mm,
told. And it's kind of like, as opposed to, okay, what can I do to, for me, but if it's like, if you
mm.
look outward and say, what can I do that's going to help others? What can I do that's going to help customers down the line? What can I do to help, this? Then again, it's a mind shift where you're looking outward instead of inward. And I think we get more pleasure and more satisfaction out of that outlook than the me thing.
Yeah, and again, the more downstream consequences of your work that you try to recognize that you influence, the better. You might think you're I don't know, let's say you have a shop and you sell flowers, you're a florist. You might think, I just make bouquets of flowers. But no, you know what? If you do your job well, you get the right product in at the right time, you stock it, you're a master of your craft, you're going to show somebody else that they're loved. That person who knows that they're loved is going to have a better day at work, or they're going to feel more confident. They're going to get that job. They're going to meet the partner of their dreams. They're going to, downstream, they're going to be able to save enough money to buy a home. They're going to adopt children. I don't know. There's all this stuff, and you can almost, in your mind, you can take it to the nth degree, but
Yeah.
it just becomes so powerful because then you're realizing, oh no, if I get out of bed on a rainy Monday morning and do my job well, one day, as a little boy and girl are going to play bat and ball on the beach on holiday because of something that I created, and that's lovely, and
Uh,
that's what we all want to think about when we go to work.
I always had the slide in my leadership presentations that I would give of this guy. I'm a bit of a guitar nut, and so I was in Nashville, Tennessee, and I toured the Gibson Guitar Factory. And I
Wow.
saw this guy polishing this guitar, but I could tell by his body language he was really into it. Now, if you look at that just on the surface, you'd think, how boring a job is that? He's polishing with a buffer this guitar. And so the little tour group went ahead, and I've never been afraid to ask a question. So I, say, hey, I'd like to ask you something. He takes off his, headphones. He comes over and he goes, yeah, what's up? And I go, I can just tell that you're kind of into that. What makes you, be so into that? And he held up the guitar. He said, well, see, this is a Gibson 335. And I said, I know it's a Gibson 335. And they said, well, the reason I'm into this is because when I'm building this guitar and buffing this guitar, he said, I'm just dreaming that someday I'm going to be at a live concert or I'm going to watch somebody on TV wailing on this guitar and making hundreds of maybe thousands of people happy. He goes, what's better
Yeah.
than that? And so he did
Amazing.
just what you described, right?
Yeah, yeah,
He made the down the line purpose of what the heck he's doing, even though the task itself may be mundane.
yeah. And so then when he's looking at his business, his job's not to just to make that guitar. There's probably got many other things about the business that you'd be able to see. You'd be able to think, oh well, the way the tours are sold, I think you might have an idea about how we could do that differently. How we could put a better signage up outside to attract more people. How we there'd be loads of things beyond your immediate job that you can see and you can contribute ideas towards, and you're going to do that because you really believe in this thing that you're doing, because you know that one day that perfect chord's going to come out on a big stage, and that's going to put a smile on so many people's faces. They're going to be out exercising to that music, they're going to be living their lives. That's the stuff that we do. And it's a really hard thing for leaders to do, I will say, find a personal mission, because leaders get so used to trotting out the values and the mission statements and all this stuff that the company gives them, that sometimes I think they seem to stop believing it, and they really struggle with reconnecting with the miracle of their work. But the more you can do it as a leader, the better. And then you can teach your team members also to see the
Yeah,
purpose that they have. And then when you've got a personal mission, yeah, you'll always step up and say, I want to make something better, because why wouldn't you?
yeah, for sure. And you also said that you have to, we're talking about change, and so we have to be okay with change. But you also stated that today, if something works well, it's obsolete or it's going to be obsolete.
Mm,
So you just
yeah.
have to be willing to look at things in a maybe new and different way and be open to, things being different.
That came to me as a really pivotal moment in my career, because I moved from Kimberly Clark, traditional manufacturing business, brilliant at what they do, learned so much there. But it was very much of a, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. Is like, if the machines are running well, let's leave them alone. Don't meddle. And it was at Microsoft that Bill Gates said that, if today something works, it's obsolete, which really made me stop and think. Is that, well, that's terrifying, because what, everything's obsolete, is it? But it is. If you think about it, everything that you ever do, every process, every system, every tool, everything you know is almost certainly suboptimal in some way. Someone somewhere has figured out a better way to do it. Cheaper, faster, smoother, whatever. Even the way we're recording this podcast right now, there's almost certainly a better technology. We just haven't discovered it yet or felt the need to embrace it yet. But I think it's a wonderful thing when you go to work and you think, okay, everything here could be done better. Let's be honest. There are no sacred cows. There's nothing I have to protect. Everything here could be improved. That gives you absolute permission, I think, to improve something. Not everything, just something. And then say, okay, where do I start? What's the one thing that I can improve now? And then there'll be another thing tomorrow or next week, and on we go. That's a great way to go to work.
Great way. And I love your story too, that that you talked about OHP, the overhead projector, and how, that was the state of the art, right? And now you look at that and we just laugh. But at a time that was something pretty cool, so
Yeah, yeah. The leaky bucket approach. Think about your skills as in a leaky bucket. You will grow, you learn skills, and you have to let skills go as well. And the more you embrace that, the more a capacity and more energy you have for finding out what's the next thing you need.
So describe that leaky bucket theory a little bit more. And what I got out of the book was that you have holes in the bucket and you want things to leak out of the bucket because then there's more room to put new things in, right? Is that the
Yeah, and
basic?
I think it's a change from previous generations, to be fair. It's this is different now. Our parents, grandparents, whatever, they could learn a skill and they could get good at it. And, within reason, they could do that job for the rest of their lives if they chose to, and it wouldn't change dramatically. Yes, of course, there were improvements, but, fundamentally, if you became a master craftsman at this job, then, those skills were looked up to and you passed them on to next generations. Now, you have to accept that the skills that you learn in your job this week are almost certainly not going to be valuable to you at the end of your career because they'll have been replaced by something else. And so the leaky bucket metaphor is just a way of sort of thinking about it. It's okay to learn something new, but you also know that that skill's not going to last you forever. You're never done. You have to keep topping up that bucket with new skills because there are new ways to do things all the time. So just embrace that, enjoy that, and try to find the fun in the opportunity to learn something new whenever you can.
And you wrote that was pretty amazing when you see things written sometimes like, oh my gosh, that's profound, which is you said two-thirds of today's school children will be doing tasks or doing things in their careers that don't even exist today.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's
this has been true
mind-boggling.
for this
Yeah.
has been true for a long time actually, that we've been educating kids for a future that we don't know. It's just really come into focus now because I mean, even just in the last 2 years, you look at how AI has transformed our expectations of how we can interface with computers and what they can do for us. Every day I learn something new. I think that is amazing. It's not perfect, but it's just mind-blowingly clever, the things that are emerging, and that's in the last 2 years. So yeah, we there's nothing in the curriculum here in the UK that teaches young children about AI. It literally doesn't exist, even though it's with us. So we are educating kids for a future that will be very different. The value of memory, of acquired knowledge and experience is reduced all of the time because you can get an instant answer to almost anything wherever you are, literally by just talking to your watch. I mean, that's how crazy it's got.
So much of probably your education, my education was memorization. Like you
Mm,
need to memorize this and whatever. And I always remember the Einstein quote that said, never waste time memorizing something that you could look it up somewhere. So
mm.
that's kind of the same thing with computers and AI or whatever, is that you don't need to uh, memorize it or have that because you can get it somewhere else. So then you spend time on your other gifts that maybe AI doesn't have.
Yeah, there is still, of course, there's value in being able to memorize certain things, but the value of facts is reduced when they're instantly accessible, and that's been happening all through my 50 or so years on the planet. It's my I remember my grandfather had the Encyclopedia Britannica, his most prized possession, and I used to have to cycle around there on my bike, 2 mile trip to his house to do my homework because they were the books. That was the knowledge. It was on the shelf, right? But now, of course, I don't have to cycle anywhere. I can just get those answers instantly, as can my children, as can everybody else's children. So yeah, memorization of things is less valuable, but the ability to think and to critically assess information is as important as ever. And in fact, I'd argue it's probably more important because there is so much information to trawl through.
You came up with an acronym used in the
Mm,
book, and interestingly enough, it's your last name, Frost. So the acronym stands for F is follow, R is react, O is open, S is surprise, and T is tell.
mm,
So tell us a little bit about, I know we could spend the whole time just discussing all those points, but just in a
sure.
nutshell, what do each of those acronym letters mean to you and stand for, and what are we trying to do with
Yeah, it is a very shameless branding device. Let's be honest.
that?
Although I was honest in the book, it wasn't always Frost. It was Frowes, I think it was, and then I changed the last two because I realised, oh, that's almost my name, which sort of just felt like the right thing to do. But look, it's a 5-step process. I've tried to make the simplest thing I can imagine. I've taken away all the fluff, all of the sort of extra steps that I thought were there, and I tried to get down to the essence of what did I do in my career? What did my colleagues at Microsoft do? What was some of the things that we did that allowed us to explore something that was new, make sense of it, and then decide what to do with it or not? And so, yeah, if you boil it down to its absolute essence, it's finding something to follow, identifying the one thing that you need to know in the near future that you don't properly understand right now. What's the most important thing? The one thing, then you go away and learn all about it and then choose your reaction to it. Is it important to your future or not? It's a check step, because if you don't do this check step, it's really easy to get excited by, I don't know, some AI thing, think that's going to change the business. And you're off all the eggs in that basket and you're putting all your energy into it. And sometimes it turns out you've chosen the wrong horse to back. So there's a check step in there. And then you've got open, surprise, and tell, which are my 3 superpowers, as I call them. They're just simple ways to look at things very differently, to play some cognitive tricks on yourself, bluntly, to trick your brain into coming up with different solutions, bolder solutions than you might otherwise do. And the human skills really are curiosity, better human imagination, and of course, communicating human to human with other people to get them to help you to make your ideas practical and achievable.
And that's the part I think people, fear will leave, but I don't see that ever leaving, in the sense that communication between person to person, no AI is going to replace that. So, we need to make sure that we keep up those skills, because that's always going to be there, right? Isn't that what you believe?
Yeah. Well, I think all 3 of those skills, the ability to look at things with human, like biologically created curiosity, is really important, because you can't ask an AI to do that. There's no technology that we don't even know what human curiosity is. We can't define it, because it's a process that's so interwoven into the complexities of our human brains. So if you can do that, if you can be genuinely curious about things through the filter of your human mind and experience, and you can be humanly creative with things so that you're filtering out the bad ideas and zeroing in on the things that feel really humanly exciting to you, and you can talk to other human beings about them and read their gestures, and together you can sort of land on that thing that's truly exciting. That's stuff you can attempt to do with some technology today, but it won't give you as good a result. It simply won't. So that's why I call them superpowers, because if you can master those 3 things and turn up to work and do those things on a regular basis, you'll be so valuable to any organization, because they can't get that from anywhere else.
You also stated that a company only grows when the individuals within it grow. So
Mm.
that's that lifelong learning. If you have a culture and a company where people are always learning and always excited about that learning process and whatever, I think you have a chance to, really grow the company and succeed in the business world.
Yeah, individual learning fuels the collective growth. I think that's a really important principle. And a key part of my process in the Ready Already growth cycle is that it is up to each individual to pursue something that truly matters to them. It's not something that comes from the boss. It's not something that you're told you have to follow this course. You really should be thinking about what's my work? What's the thing that I care most passionately about, fueled by my personal mission? And that's the thing I'm going to go and learn. And if we accept that diversity and that freedom of exploration in our organization, we've suddenly got, if it's an organization of 20 people, you've got 20 people potentially exploring different things. That's different areas of learning coming into the business versus, what otherwise we'd have, one thing that the boss thinks important. We're all going to learn about this thing and we're all pursuing that. That's not going to give you the breadth of ideas that you probably need in order to keep up and thrive, alongside your competitors. So yes, it's a really powerful thing when you unleash individuals to pursue something that they truly care about.
I remember I had a mentor who was much senior to me. And in kind of a weird way, I became the CEO and he was on the board. So in a weird way, it was kind of like now, at least hierarchical, I was higher than he was. But we came up with this idea way back in the day where we're going to, do some leadership development and some clinical development training and so on. And he was, as a board member, really excited about that. And I'll never forget this lesson that he taught me because I knew this all along, but he said it so perfectly. So he announced that he was going to retire in June of one year. In January of that year, he called me and said, "Hey, Steve, where are we on this plan? Let's get this going." And I said, "Well, we're just making a few tweaks to it and we're talking with this organization. I think we'll have it launched here very soon." And he said, "Well, that's good news because, I want to at least get through that first level before I retire." And here's a guy who had all this knowledge and all this training over, a probably 40-year career, and he was excited to get something new and learn something new in the last, 4 or 5 months of his working. So
It's
to me, that
fantastic.
really
Yeah.
showed that's what it's about, right?
Yeah, and there's a story in the book, and I tell this on stage because it's a lovely story. About a year ago, I was at a big IT conference and I gave a talk, and I in the morning there was loads of stuff from the leadership of the company about all the change, all the dramatic differences, all of the new things that were going on. And then I did my talk after lunch, and a guy came up to me and he said, "I want to say thank you because after this morning, um, I was really, I haven't got the energy for all this change. It's too much." He said, "I'm 6 months away from retirement. And honestly, over lunch, I decided I would go to HR and see if I could get my retirement brought forward because I just haven't got the energy to go through another cycle of big changes. I'm done." But he said, "After listening to you, I realized that was a mistake. It's my life. This is my opportunity. I will retire in 6 months' time." He said, "My wife will kill me if I don't. But I am going to make this the best 6 months. And when I walk out the door in 6 months' time, I want all of my colleagues to be really sad to see me going because of all the fun and the energy and the ideas that I had, rather than if I carry on the way I am and the way I've been." They'll just be glad that that grumpy old man has finally left the building. I don't want that to happen. That's my legacy. And I think what I think is nice about that is that he was 6 months away from retirement. But if we're all honest with ourselves, we're never potentially more than 6 months away from a dramatic change in our own lives. It might be a job change, it might be a relationship change, it could be a health scare, it could be all sorts of things. Those things can creep up on you. So it's quite a healthy way to look at the world and say, okay, I'm just in a 6 month cycle here. Things could be very different in 6 months. So I better knuckle down and do the best I can. And that's a very different way of thinking about things than what I see with lots of people in business. They're sort of thinking, oh, well, I won't start work on this project yet because it'll be a bit easier next year when we've got the new IT system, or when the new CEO comes on board, we'll get the budget and we'll do it then. It's like, no, do it now. Just get on with it because this is your opportunity. Don't wait.
Absolutely. What a much more positive way to look
Yeah.
at it for sure.
Yeah, it has to be, doesn't it?
And I do in the book that the case studies are profound. As I told you before, in one of my identities is I'm a storyteller, so I love a good story.
Mm.
But those kind of stories, bring it all together and make it work. And yeah, I can relate to that. So it's a good job on the case studies. The other thing you do in the book is you challenge readers to ask those deep and vulnerable questions, you know, about ourselves. And, you say, now don't skip that. It's easy to say, oh, I'm not going to do that exercise. I just skip it. But you say, don't skip it. Take the time to do that because really understanding that and becoming vulnerable with yourself is
Mm.
when you discover things like you just mentioned.
You've got to be honest with yourself. it's really easy to sort of drift through life, and frankly, if you're permitted to drift through life, you're very privileged. You're very lucky to be able to sort of, coast through and sort of get by day doing your job. Um, but it takes a lot more courage to sort of, confront your limitations, to be honest with how much you still have to learn, and to, make a plan with yourself to address those things, to seize the opportunities to be the greatest person that you can be and create the future that you really want. So yeah, the exercises are in there. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with them because I do know, I skip over them. I'll be honest, I do when I read a book. It's like, oh, well, I won't bother with that. I'm
Yeah.
far too clever. But I think it's worth taking a bit of time out between chapters just to let it rest in your mind. Just go for a walk, think about it, lie in the bath, do what you like, um, and ponder stuff. And that's where you will find a deeper truth that's true to you, and will help you to then figure out the right answers for your future.
You used the word earlier, and that word is curious, and I think that's such a powerful word. And I remember talking to somebody who was on the inner circle of President Obama's term, and somebody asked him, "Well, how would you describe him?" And I thought it was really interesting. He described him as intellectually curious.
Wow,
And
nice.
so, I agree that I like to think I'm curious. I know I'm curious. I'm always asking questions. I'm always never afraid to ask the question and learning more. And there's still so much to learn. So that word curious really resonates with me. And I was pleased
Mm.
to see it used so much in the book too.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, curiosity, because everyone's talking about it. Everyone's saying, "Oh, the future belongs to those who are most curious," and so on. But there actually aren't many guides to help you be more curious. We all sort of know roughly what that is, but okay, where do you start? How do you do it? And so in the book, the very simple process that I offer to people is to try to rediscover some more childlike curiosity. So it's a great way of getting unstuck. If you've been in a job for a while and you know exactly what your workplace looks like, you know exactly who your colleagues are and how things operate around here, you know the ropes. But if you go into work with real childlike curiosity, and just imagine it's your first day there. You've never been there before. Look around. What do you see? What would a child say? And they'd probably ask some really wild questions like, "Why is there a window right up there in the building?" Or, they'd say, "Well, why is there a fire extinguisher there?" There's just stuff that seems really pointless to ask in a way, because often when a child does ask a question, it's so obvious what the answer is. But they're just trying to feel safe in the world and make sense of it. But something happens when we become adults and we just accept that things are the way they are. We accept that well, obviously there's a meeting room there with a broken light because that's the room with the broken light. I'm making up things off the top of my head, but you just sort of accept it. But the minute you start questioning things, you realize, oh, hang on, there are other possibilities. So that step in my process is called open, because I do think we have to open our minds to other possibilities. We know how things are, but what we need to do is create space so that we can know how they could be. What could they become? And there are so many things when you actually start questioning about most businesses that yeah, there's a sort of logic to it, but it's not optimal. We already know it's obsolete in some way because that's the way the world is. And actually, there's a lot of stuff that makes no sense at all. It's just the way we do it. Why do we send an invoice by post to customers? Well, that's what the system does. We've always done that. And they kind of, but why? Well, because people used to like paper invoice. Why though? Why? Well, what? And suddenly you realize, oh, actually, there's another possibility. Maybe we don't send invoices. Maybe we do some. Maybe we send them by fax because that could be our niche. That could be our point of difference. I don't know. It's there's just suddenly you get into that surprise state, which is the second thing. You realize, oh, the space that you create with naive curiosity, you can fill it with just so many wondrous possibilities and different things that it's really quite a fun exercise to do. Now, you're not going to do the wild stuff because that's why you've got that third superpower there, getting some human beings to help you make your ideas better, and turn it into a reality.
So we adults need to ask more why questions like kids do. If you're around any little kid, it's like, why, why, why? But as adults, we don't ask enough whys.
Yeah, just having the courage not to be like an annoying child, but to ask. why is that? And I often cite this one on stage. I remember at Microsoft asking, why is the Monday meeting on a Monday? Which is such a daft question because it's literally got the answer within it. But I hadn't thought, I wanted to know. And nobody knew. It was just the way it was. And then the minute we started sort of questioning, once we got over ourselves, the fact that actually, so we don't have to have a meeting on a Monday. No, we don't. If we don't want to, we could do something else. And then when you get into surprise, then you can start having creative ideas. Okay, so how else could we do it? Well, we could send an email. We could have a meeting on a Sunday. That would, we could have a picnic. We we could go for a run. We could do anything, couldn't we? And you're like, oh yeah, we could. And suddenly you think, oh great. Okay, so things don't have to be the way they are. No, things can be different. We just have to decide that that's the thing we want to improve.
Need to do things for the right reason. I was aware of a company that would always have their huddle meeting, their Monday morning meeting, whatever you call it, on Friday afternoon. It's like, well, finally somebody said, well, why? And no one could answer. Well, the reason why is because they wanted to make sure everybody didn't leave early on a Friday. Okay, that's the wrong
Yeah,
reason to have a meeting. I think that's
exactly.
going to work, right?
Exactly. That's a really unnatural behavior that's been forced through, using the wrong techniques. And then you say, okay, but I'm perfectly happy to stay here on a Friday if there's exciting, fun work going on. Not don't hold me hostage because you've got this meeting here. There's surely we can have that meeting on another day, and use our low energy on a Friday to do something more fun as a group, so that we learn together. Yeah, it's easy to
So,
fix these things when you ask why.
sure. Uh, I hope I say this right. The Shoshin
Yeah.
concept.
Mm.
Describe what that is and why that resonates with you. So,
Yeah, Shoshin is very closely related to the ability to have an open mind. It's a principle that Buddhists learn, Zen Buddhists particularly, where they have to read the same prayer text throughout their life. And as we all know, a Zen Buddhist is sort of seeking learning, lifelong learning. They're seeking to sort of become more complete and more understanding of themselves and of the world. But they've only got these same prayer texts that they must read. So they're taught to do it with something called Shoshin, which is a beginner's mind. So that each time they read a prayer text, they're taught to have a beginner's mind, to read it like they've never read it before, to treat it as if it's a completely new document, to see what new things it says to them in that moment. And that's a really good proxy for what I'm describing with open. That open step is that ability to look at things afresh, to look at the way we do anything in our business and say, I've not seen this before. Does this make sense to me? What am I learning? What could I do differently? What could be improved? And that's how you can take that sort of principle and bring it into your life. And it's a wonderful thing to do because so many people go into work and they're maybe a bit battered and bruised and tired and they're a bit fed up with it. And it's another day of work. When you walk through the door and say, okay, I'm going to look at this and see what I make of it, see what makes sense to me, see what I feel I could do better. Suddenly you've got a purpose and you can start pursuing that. So that's what Shoshin is from Buddhism.
the S in the acronym stands for
Mm,
surprise, and you say
yes.
in that this step makes people nervous. Why does it make people nervous?
Well, because it's about creativity, really. And as soon as you say creativity, I always see half the room is sort of shrinks away, and the other half is kind of excited. Oh, get to be creative! Thank goodness. Um, a lot of people struggle with, they don't think they're creative, or they feel like there are other people who are more creative, and so on. So I tend to refer to surprise as imagination. It's just about having the ability to daydream, to think, to try to see what you can come up with. And I called it surprise because I want people to just surprise themselves and eventually others with the boldness of their ideas. I think it's really true that breakthrough creativity, all of the great inventions, the great people in the world, they breakthrough creativity is unconcerned with external validation. People go for that creativity because they believe in something. They think, hey, this could be possible. The minute you expose many ideas to other people, those other people will kill those ideas or they'll tell you why they're wrong or whatever. And worse still, what we tend to do as adults is we have an idea. We think, oh, wouldn't it be good if we could do that? What if we did this? And we'll kill the idea ourselves because we say, oh, no, the boss will never go for that. Or, no, I'd never get the budget. Oh, no, that won't happen. And the idea never even sees the light of day. So what the surprise step is trying to say to people is go bold, have big ideas. Obviously, you're not going to, be so crazy that it's totally fantastical, but push yourself to have an idea that breaks some of the constraints that are holding you back. And don't worry about getting those ideas to be perfect. Don't worry about making them so they're viable or feasible. Just try to have some non-obvious ideas that might prove to be valuable. And by allowing yourself to sort of stay in that state for a period of time, you can go into the final step, which is tell. And tell is all about having the courage to share those crazy ideas. It's like, I had this thought, maybe we could actually merge with that company, or maybe we could stop sending invoices altogether. And but doing it in a way with people that will try to not shoot you down in flames and tell you you are mad, your ideas are terrible, but to say, yeah, that might work. Yes, and is the key phrase that I give to people. Yes, and we should check with Bob because he's in finance. He'd know how we could do that. Yes, and we should check with legal. Yes, and we should do some research, see if any other companies have ever tried that before. Now, those sorts of responses can bring a big crazy idea that you might have had slowly back to reality, and the idea will get smaller because that's what businesses do. They bring them back to reality. But you'll never end up with a big idea if you start small. That's a guarantee. So you start big. Try to have bold ideas, because that's what your competitors will do. That's what the startup on the other side of the world will do. That's what the tech person will do when they come after your business. They'll be thinking, they won't have any constraints on their imagination. They'll just let fly. So we all need to learn to do that a bit more. And that's what the surprise step is all about.
I was thrilled in the book when you brought up improv. In the leadership development program that we had in our
Mm.
company that we designed, we actually hired an acting company to come in and do
Oh,
improv
wow.
with our people. And that's where Yes and comes from. And so that
Yes.
improv piece is it's just amazing to see people when they're forced to think that way, to take on the conversation by yes and
Mm.
continue, off the top of their head. I thought it was very powerful.
I think it was one of the most transformative management learnings that I ever had. I met Neil Malarkey, who's a very famous. He used to be a comedy partner to Mike Myers back in the day, and back in the UK. And he's at the Comedy Store Players in London. And I met him many years ago and did an improv one day thing with him. And yeah, he taught me, as well as everyone else, the yes and principle. And it comes from improv, is that, if you're on stage, imagine two actors, two people on stage, and then the audience gives them a scene or whatever. If one of the performers says one thing, the absolute day one level of improv is you just start with yes and try to build on it. The yes acknowledges and accepts what they've given to you. They say, I'm a fishmonger. And you say, yes, and that's a beautiful fish you're holding. The scene has sort of moved along. If you say, no, you're not, you're a potato, then the scene dies, and if we take that same skill into business, if somebody has an idea, the default setting, I think, for an awful lot of us is to say, no, that won't work because we tried that before. No, we never get budget. No, no, no. And that's not people being malicious. That's just people trying to be efficient and, realistic. When you have to say yes, and you have to work a bit harder, but actually you can sometimes see the good in an idea and you can take it to another place. So yes, and is a brilliant tool to unstick teams who are struggling with creativity or struggling to sort of embrace new possibilities.
It was very impactful and powerful when we used it, and people just had fun. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just fun. You'd laugh at yourself and laugh at the others, and but yet learn that very valuable, piece that you just described.
Yeah.
In the book, you also have this great quote. I have to read it. The light at the end of the tunnel may be you, and I think you give credit to Aerosmith
Yeah,
for
it's from an
that.
Aerosmith song of all things.
Yeah.
But it's a lovely line, isn't it?
It is because we often think that maybe it's not this or it's not that. That you can be the light. You can be the one who comes up with that idea or that yes and comment that moves it along to the next level. So it's
Yeah,
awesome.
and I think it's for me that line, the light at the end of the tunnel could be you, maybe you. Far too often we're sort of I've certainly felt this, and I think if I have any regrets about my career, there were times when I thought the system was against me, that I was never going to get permission, there were idiots in charge, whatever whatever I was thinking, and that stuff is really defeatist and negative. And actually, you know what, you've got to remember, the only person that you can truly influence is yourself. And if you step up and you do the very best you can, you might be that person that finds that answer, or one day, convinces the idiot boss to do the thing that you need to do or whatever. But you've got to keep going. And so, that you might feel like you're in a tunnel, you might think times are hard and so on, but there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And if that were you, what would you do today to get you through that tunnel and out the other side? Then that's a wonderful way to sort of keep driving yourself forwards.
Alistair, in anticipation of our discussion today, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to be sure and get into the program today?
Look, I think we've talked a lot about my about the book, about the principles that are within it. I there's one thing that I often think is important. I call it a future ready mindset, simply because I got really annoyed when I was at the tech sector and we talked about things being future proofed. And many people still use that language, future proofing, future proof solution, future proof ideas, future proof thinking, whatever. And for me, future proofed, it's in the past tense. It's very finite. It kind of suggests we've done that work. We're now future proofed. We don't need to think about it anymore. And I think that's a really dangerous way to think about life. The most you can ever be is future ready. There is no such thing as future proofing. I describe that as a myth, a lie that's taught to us by the tech sector, and it's false. Nothing is ever finished. It's always going to be changed. So don't wait for perfection. Get on with it. So that's a really key principle for me. And so future ready is a better way to look at your tomorrow and say, okay, what do I need to do today that will make my tomorrow a little bit easier? That's the key principle for me. And I love talking about this stuff, I hope you can tell.
Oh,
And
definitely.
I get out and I love getting in front of audiences, working with groups at conferences and industry events. So any opportunity I have to do that, if anyone's listening and thinks, oh, this is the sort of stuff that my team needs, then reach out, get in touch. I'd love to chat.
How many keynotes do you do a year?
Well, I try not to do too many, and I try to do sort of maybe 2, 3 a week. That's sort of my limit. I like to do a really bespoke job for everybody, and that requires quite a lot of work. So it's one of those weird professions that people see you for an hour, or they think it's just an hour. You turn up and talk, but no, there's
Oh,
so
yeah.
much work that goes into every event. So there's a lot of thinking that also takes place, plus a lot of traveling as well, of course.
And so you created a monster, the preparation, the travel alone for that 45-minute to an hour speech it can be daunting to some for sure.
Yeah, but I never underestimate that. That's such a privilege to be put in front, to be trusted, to be put in front of an audience of, whether it's 10 people or 10,000. You're trusted with their minds for that period of time. But the transformative effect that it can have on a group of people when they realize, oh, we can do this. Oh, we do have permission to have ideas. Oh, we don't have to, wait for the boss to tell us what to do. We can, this is the good stuff. It's so valuable to an organization. That's why I love doing it.
At this point in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question, and that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
Wow. I would say you may be a leader. You may have been given the position, and well done you. But no one but you expects you to have all the answers. Sometimes we feel as leaders we're the font of all knowledge, we're the wisdom. Everyone turns to us for advice. There's always that awkward moment in the meeting when everyone turns to you because we've reached an impasse and we need someone to pass judgment. Look, as a leader, it's okay not to know. The world moves so quickly. Why would you know? It's okay to admit that. It's okay to be committed to being a learn-it-all, but it's not. It's absolutely not okay to be a stubborn know-it-all and to try to entrench people in your experience because that's right and they're wrong. And I would say that in fact, accepting that you don't have all the answers is now utterly vital if you want to lead your colleagues to the future that they are collectively capable of creating. That's the leadership objective. You don't have to have all the answers, and it's okay to admit that.
Very well said, and I couldn't agree more. I think you're right on. So, Alistair, this has been a real pleasure talking with you today, all across the whole continent and the Atlantic Ocean. And yeah, that's when technology is cool, where we can have a discussion like this and feel like we're just sitting in the room together having a great discussion. So, thanks for your wisdom and your insight today. And I can feel your passion and your vibe coming across the screen. So you're doing great things. So keep on doing them. And it's been a real pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you so much. I've loved it.
Okay, take care. Bye bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.